Name a team that thinks it's going into a rebuild with a new coach and a new GM, but the same mediocre quarterback, and I present to you the New York Giants. What is going on, Clutch Crew sports fans? This is Zach, back with another 2022 NFL team preview episode. And today I present to you the New York Football Giants. And I'm going to be previewing their 2022 season, talking about their interesting offseason where they are starting a rebuild, but they're not quite fully committed to that rebuild just yet, possibly looking for a future quarterback in the next season's draft. I won't talk too much about that since this is a 2022 season preview, but the Giants have an interesting mix of new and old on their team, and I'm going to be talking about what I think their schedule and their season will be like. So with that being said, guys, let's get started. Now, like I just said, there's been some continuity and some changes with the New York Giants, kind of like departures and additions, but it's really the continuity that's stood out to me with this team. Like, you have Daniel Jones, who's, I believe, going into his fourth season now, and Saquon Barkley also has been there a little while. So these are two guys that Giants fans have known and seen for a while now. They're coming back despite not having much success, not making the playoffs at all, not even really being close to making the playoffs in any season that they've been a part of the team. And to me, this could be the last year that we see this. I think it's a strong possibility that both Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, this is their last season with the Giants. Both have been kind of disappointing first-round picks that, if they had, lived up to their ceiling, this Giants team could be looked at as a contender in the NFC East and the NFC as a whole. But these guys just haven't, lived up to their hype. They haven't, delivered to the expectations that Giants fans have for them. And this could be their last hoorah. This could be their last time together on the Giants. And then also, too, I know they drafted Evan Neal, and I've got a meme here from the movie It, and it's with Eli Manning in it, but it applies to Daniel Jones. They drafted Evan Neal, a right tackle from Bama, but this offensive line still is not very good. And honestly, talking to people that know the NFL, and their offensive line is probably the worst, offensive line in the past 3 years. And I know every fan thinks their team has the worst offensive line, but the Giants seriously have had a bad offensive line. And it's not like they haven't tried to fix it. They have, but they just have not had success fixing it. And ultimately, that's why this team has not played well, is the offensive line has been so bad, and you can't win games when you have the worst offensive line in football. So, they didn't completely revamp their offensive line like I thought they would have. So that's, to me, a continuity with the Giants. And until they really fix that, it's really all pointless, the rest of their team. But they did make some significant changes. They brought in a new coach and a new GM from the Buffalo Bills tree. So you're hoping that they bring in, that the winning that the Bills had, follows these guys to the Giants. First-time head coach Brian Daboll here, never been a head coach in the NFL. He's getting this first shot with the Giants. I think both these guys have said Daniel Jones, they're supportive. They're going to unleash Daniel Jones. But, I'll talk about Jones in a little bit here. I just don't see that happening. But, it's going to be interesting to see, what kind of offense, who calls the plays, and what Brian Daboll does, because Saquon Barkley is the best running back that he's coached. He was better than any running back in Buffalo. So will they be relying on the run if Saquon can stay healthy, or is he really going to unleash Daniel Jones? And people are, the ceiling for Daniel Jones is like a Josh Allen. Like, people are saying, oh, Brian Daboll is going to turn Daniel Jones into his next Josh Allen. But personally, I just don't see that happening. But, the Giants are definitely trying for that to happen. Joe Sheen, their new general manager, I thought he had a good draft. I think he inherited a really bad situation with bad contracts. They spend the most at wide receiver than anybody else in the league, and they had the least amount of touchdowns for wide receivers. Kenny Golladay being an example of that. It's not going to be easy. I say give Joe at least 3 or 4 years, maybe even the 4 to 5 years before you can really see what his vision is, because this team just is loaded with bad contracts, and it's not like they had a great situation. They did have 2 first-round draft picks, so those guys are going to be watched closely to see how well he, is as a talent evaluator. But the big number one story key thing for the Giants is, what will it take for Daniel Jones to get extended? Will he get extended? He was not given the 5th-year option, which to me shows that the Giants are betting against him. If they really thought that he was going to have a great season, you give him the 5th-year option because it's a bargain compared to, a Dak Prescott. One of these, if he gets a contract extension, it's going to be much bigger than the 5th-year extension will be. But the fact that they didn't give it to him, in my opinion, it's a smart move, because they haven't seen enough from him to warrant it yet. But at the same time, they're leaving themselves in a bad situation. If he does end up being a good, a star, or, worthy of an extension this year, then they're going to have to bite the bullet. And with one good season, I don't know. It's a really risky situation. I'm sure Giants fans kind of feel torn about this, because he's a good guy. Everyone's always had good things to say about him. It's not like he's a blame deflecting or a diva or anything like that. They're probably rooting for him, but I just don't know what it's going to take to get an extension. Is he going to have to, play like Ryan Tannehill? Because Ryan Tannehill was in a similar situation where it was looking like he was going to be delegated to backup status, and then he ended up having a great season, got a big extension. Now his future is kind of questionable with the Titans. So what happens to Daniel Jones for the Giants? Clearly they've committed to him. I mean, I know they brought in Tyrod Taylor, but there is really no threat from the draft this year. So it's definitely his team. It's his last chance to prove that he's a starting quarterback with the Giants, because if he doesn't get extended with the Giants, I don't see him going anywhere else really and starting for the long term. If he does, he's going to end up being, in a bad situation, probably on a bad team that's kind of a placeholder quarterback. So Daniel Jones, will he or will he not get extended, is the biggest thing this season for the Giants. Now their schedule is interesting. Their over-under is set at 7.5 wins, which to me, I'm going under on this. That seems like a lot to me. I know they play in the NFC East, so you've got the Commanders twice, you've got Philly twice, and Dallas twice. But Philly and Dallas, I think, are definitely, at least they project to be much better than the Giants. So I don't think they can win any of those games. Washington, you would think, is more on their level, so they should win their home game against Washington. They could beat them twice. I wouldn't be surprised at that. But I just don't see that many wins for this team. They've got possible games that I think I could see them winning, be home against Carolina, home against Chicago, at Jacksonville, at Seattle, home against Houston, home against the Lions. I know that's probably like 5 or 6 right there, but to win all those is, asking a lot to me. It does look like it's an easy schedule when you've got these AFC South teams that you're playing, but I'm just not high on the Giants. I think they're going to end up with a top 3 draft pick probably. So, that's looking around the range of like 4 to 5 wins. So 7.5, too much for me. I'm going under on that. And it's looking at last year's odds makers had them at 4 wins last year, and that's exactly what they got. So if the odds makers are right, then the Giants are going to improve their win total by 3 games at least. But this is just one I just don't see it. I think it's probably being inflated by Giants fans, honestly. There's a lot of Giants fans that are going to be betting on this team to do well. A lot of excitement with the new head coach and Brian Daboll. A favorable looking schedule, quite honestly. I will give their most important game is going to be, I think, the road game against Jacksonville week 7. I'm a Jags fan, so I'm going to be watching that game, rooting for Jacksonville. But if they can win that game, that could start them up with a nice little run where they play Giants, Seahawks, Texans, and Lions. If they were to go 4-0 there, then you're in the hunt for the playoffs, and then who knows, maybe you steal Philly at home later in week 14, and then they possibly contend for a wild card spot. Like I said, I just don't see that happening. But if it is going to happen, they're going to need to start off with a win against the Jaguars on the road in week 7. So those are my thoughts on the Giants' upcoming 2022 season. What do you guys think? Does Daniel Jones get extended? Is this the last year Barkley and Jones are together on this team? How much of an impact are these new rookies going to have on the team, the young guys? Kadarius Toney, does he take a step forward? There's a lot of storylines with the Giants team, but like I said, in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be a great year for them, unfortunately, for Giants fans' sake. But let me know, guys, in the comments below. And until then, remember, be clutch.